so.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
Oof.
So this is going to be the My Lai Massacre in Vietnam from 16th of March, 1968. The United States Army was going through Vietnam. They were trying to find a bunch of different like guerrilla elements. And in this one town, which I can't pronounce the province, it looks like Sun Mi Village in Quang Nai province. I'm going to butcher the shit out of it.
Sounds good.
They killed anywhere between 400 to 500 civilians, mainly men, women, and children, and elderly men. This was carried out by soldiers from C Company, 1st Battalion, 20th Infantry Regiment, 11th Brigade, and B Company, 4th Battalion, 3rd Infantry Regiment, 11th Brigade of the 23rd Americal Division, was part of Task Force Barker. And then they also went through and mutilated and raped people as young as 12. And it is the largest incident, massacre-wise, by U.S. forces in the 20th century. And with this, I think really the main thing, because like, you know, typical way that shit like this used to end up going down, you know, you have some of these leaders here where there was a total of 26 soldiers that were charged with criminal offenses, but only Lieutenant William Colley Jr., who was the leader of the 1st Platoon in C Company, was convicted. He was found guilty of murdering 22 villagers and given a life sentence. But luckily for him, he only served 3.5 under house arrest because the sentence was commuted by President Nixon.
Wow.
So he basically just killed and raped a bunch of people and got off, and no one else had anything happen to them. So that's great. And then, like, this goes through, like, literally everything that everybody did. I don't think right now we need to get into that. There was 400 to 500 people that were killed and mutilated and raped. We can kind of guess, if we get into individuals, what they did, what happened. What I do want to talk about, though, is the W01 Hugh Thompson Jr., who basically was, like, the hero to this entire thing. And he got like fucked over big time by the army after this. So while this massacre is going on, Thompson and the crew he had, so they were in a Hiller OH-323 Raven, which is like a small helicopter, worked a lot to stop the killings that were happening. So they were blocking American soldiers and like officers and enlisted from getting to this village, along with saving the Vietnamese members of the village. So they would fly in, they would pick them up, and they were making like threats and stuff. He was making radio calls this entire time, trying to notify people that like, hey, like we're literally massacring civilians. Like there's nobody here other than civilians and we're just killing all of them. Of course, with knowing how everything went, nothing happened from that. And basically it turned into a search and destroy of the entire village. In 1970, so 2 years later, Thompson testified against the people responsible for the massacre, and that's those 26 officers and enlisted soldiers, including William Colley. And they were charged with criminal offenses, but were either acquitted or pardoned. The huge one is Colley, who was convicted and then served a commuted sentence on house arrest, which doesn't really do anything. Unfortunately, because of what Thompson had to witness and deal with, and then deal with in the aftermath of essentially the army trying to shut him up, he experienced PTSD, alcoholism, divorce, severe nightmare disorder. He remained in the Army, though, until November 1st, 1983, and then continued living as a helicopter pilot in the southeastern United States. So even after all this, he stayed in. In 1998, so 30 years after the massacre, Thompson and 2 other members of his crew, Andrada and Colburn, were awarded Soldier's Medal. Andrada was posthumously. Okay. And that is the Army's highest award for bravery not involving a direct conflict with the enemy, which kind of seems fucking weird because at that point it seemed like the Army was the enemy in that situation, but I guess they don't count it that way. And then they have a Sunmy Memorial where Thompson and Colburn received the Peace Abbey Courage and Conscience Award. So really just not a great situation all around. It is good that there are people like Hugh Thompson Jr. out there that were able to step up, him and his helicopter crew.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But Vietnam, so this is the largest massacre in the 20th century. Vietnam had a lot of massacres for I believe, like the people that they were sending over there. Big draft thing. The U.S. citizen population was not too invested in a Vietnam because the whole thing was a sham.
Yeah.
And when you take people that are not volunteering for that service. They're told to go, and you're going to get shit on when you go back home. You're angry. You're going to be doing stuff that you shouldn't do, shouldn't happen. And that is what you get from that. You're not going to get anything good out of drafting a bunch of fucking people to fight some war that was forced into existence.
Yeah. And there's a lot of history in Vietnam itself leading up to the Vietnam War, too. So the Vietnamese were originally, like before the Americans came along, were under French control.
Yep.
And, before World War II, the French saw Vietnam as an independent territory outside of France. And when the Japanese came in willingly. And, the French let them in and said, hey, like, don't obstruct our way of life.
Right.
And the Japanese were like, okay, cool, sounds good. The Vietnamese continued, guerrilla warfare up until the Japanese left, and then they waged war against the French, and then the Americans came in. And I think it was the checkpoint where the colonel was essentially killed, and that was apparently one of the big sparks to the Vietnam War. I think that was in 1964, 1965. And the operation you're talking about was in 1968, right?
1968, yeah.
So that was a part of a big operation that started in 1965. It was Operation Starlight. And it was just a continued systematic attacks from the Americans for ferrying U.S. troops by helicopter, hitting hard points, and then we have what was the movie A Few Good Men with Mel Gibson?
Yeah.
What was the I can't remember the operation.
I know who. I don't know.
I can't remember.
Phenomenal movie.
Great movie. Yeah, true, and it's a true story.
Well, let's look it up.
But one of the biggest things was the accountability of troops going out in the area. So, there were a lot of big battles going on in Vietnam at that time, but the biggest thing was the accountability of the patrols that were going out and performing some of these atrocious acts against the locals. Because, when people really think about it, if you have people in your backyard, you'd resist too. And those poor Vietnamese have been fighting for years.
And the thing is, too, and I'm really surprised that we didn't learn this from Vietnam going into Afghanistan, if you go to fight someone in their own backyard, they are going to be way more comfortable, agile, mobile.
Yeah.
In that environment. So, like, you look at how the Vietnamese went about that warfare, it was fucking brutal.
Yep.
Because they had the punky boards, they had the tunnels. They were set up in that environment to defend where they lived.
Yep.
100%. And you saw the same thing in Afghanistan, where those people could literally navigate that terrain multitudes of times faster than we could.
Yep. And
just on foot.
And I spent 2 years of my life in Afghanistan, and yes, I can attest to that. Conventional warfare is a different story compared to guerrilla warfare.
Right.
So we had, I can't tell you how many countries were in Afghanistan. We had ISAF, and every single day we talked about IEDs. We talked about sporadic ambushes, engagements, whatever. And a lot of people in history will talk about like these attacks, these battles, but like that was a small portion of the war. In Afghanistan, it was like 10 guys that was attacking, like an entire area of operation. So like in Vietnam, you had millions of people involved. So I mean, like the Tet Offensive, that was the turning point of the war. So like Vietnamese going through Cambodia and attacking through different like 3, 4, 5, 10 prong points to hit Americans across the entire state of Vietnam. Like that was.
I'm gonna have to speak up just a little bit.
Oh, am I still quite alive? Yeah. All right, but yeah, like Vietnam.
Fading away.
Like there are there's documentaries now that account for some of these guerrilla fighters that talked about their experience during the war, and they were scared for their lives the entire time because for every one American that was killed, there were 50 to 200 Vietnamese killed in their place. So I mean, like they saw us as a force to be reckoned with, but like
yeah, but you got people,
right? So that's what it comes down to now.
Was
it a good
mindset,
war?
You know, you look now even at Russia and Ukraine. The mindset of defending your homeland, you're willing to put a lot more on the line than someone that's just taking orders from some guy that they're never going to fucking meet. Mm-hmm. They don't know them. Versus when, like, they're coming to your fucking neighborhood.
Exactly.
Like, you're going to be, okay, we're going to fucking fight these people.
And then let's add the mutilations and rapes.
Yeah.
What are you going to do about it? But you're going to fight harder, right?
Right.
You're going to fight harder than the people that are invading because at that point, it's pleasure for them.
Yeah.
They gain that ground and they do what they want. And you're trying to fight for it back. So, I mean, like...
There's no point to surrender.
Right.
Because that's just going to happen. So you might as well fight and die.
Absolutely. So, like, you know, they always say, too, like, you know, the person that, you know, is fighting that's 10 times more aggressive is someone that is actually fighting for something.
Right.
And it's like, you know, the other side, it's like, you know, these poor guys that were drafted into Vietnam, they were forced to go to war, and then they're fighting against people that are fighting for their lives. Like, we were fighting for our life, too. I'll always have, you know, I'll always be sympathetic for American troops that went to Vietnam because they did what they were supposed to. They did what they were told. But then they're also fighting for people who are literally fighting for everything that they've ever come to know and love.
It's the other perspective.
Yes.
Well, it's also those people, too, that went were people without means. You know, I know people always pull the thing with Trump where, like, oh, he's a draft dodger. Bro, he draft dodged out of the Vietnam War. Anybody today would draft dodge the Vietnam War.
Sure.
There's not a single person on fucking Reddit or Facebook or whatever that if they got drafted to something like that wouldn't come up with some scenario to not do that. So, like, it's shitty, but there's a lot of people that did it. And you could pay. So at that time for the Vietnam War, you could pay money to not get drafted. So, like, they would draft you and you'd be like, we're going to pay whatever. And they would just take your name off the list.
Yeah.
So basically all you had drafted was people without means and without money.
Which is something that was wrong with the American government.
Right. And then they would get drafted to this thing. They would come back after doing horrific shit and having horrific shit done to them and people around them and get shit on by their own population for a war that neither of those two parties support. Just because you went to Vietnam, like, I don't think anybody other than, like, McNamara supported Vietnam. You're not going to find somebody that's like, we should have been there.
Yeah.
Like, no, dude, we shouldn't have. There's no way that we should have been there. And now everything you know, it's 100% we shouldn't have been there.
Well, I watched this interview, and it broke my heart. So there was a guy that enlisted in the Marines during Vietnam, and he told his dad, and his dad was a World War II vet in the European theater. And he told his son, he's like, why are you doing this? He's like, because I want to serve my country. He's like, well, it's a different war. Because he's like, you're going to go fight farmers that are protecting their backyard. I was fighting a war against people that were putting other people in ovens. And it made me really think a little bit. I was just like, you know what? Yeah. Like, that's a call. Like, Vietnam was not a call. It was, you know, there was a spread of communism. And communism was sweeping through Southeast Asia. And, like, yeah, sure, communism was a threat at the time. But what was Vietnam?
It was a false flag.
Right.
It was, you want to talk about false flags? Oh, look at going in Afghanistan for 20 fucking years.
Yeah.
Oh, there's this guy that says there's fucking WMDs in there. We're not going to verify it. We're just going to go in and start.
That was Iraq.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whatever. It's the same fucking area. We were
no,
in there
well, it was a little further. It's very different, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we were all up in there.
But each decades. Thing was like a reason to go into the next.
Yes.
So, you know.
Right, you start with
9/11
one.
was the reason for Iraq. Iraq was the reason for Afghanistan. Afghanistan was the reason to go into other places.
Afghanistan was the reason for Osama bin Laden. And, like, Afghanistan was a platform to reach people like Osama bin Laden.
That I could see, but one guy isn't the global war on terror.
It was, you know, when they were able to reach the United States.
You know,
and like it's interesting now compared to like the United States back during Vietnam, because was Vietnam able to invade the United States? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Vietnam would not think about invading our country.
Yeah, I see your point.
Right.
But you figure even when 9/11 happened, we were just off the tails of the Cold War.
Sure. And
Like, I don't think people realize how close the Cold War ending and 9/11 happening is. It's less than a decade.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like I think 7 years.
People
8
that
years.
were freshmen in high school when the Cold War ended were in college when 9/11 happened.
Right. And right now, there are... Well, now we still have World War II veterans that are still alive.
Very few.
Very few.
Very few.
But
Right. So, what was it? I was watching Cheers. You guys watch the show?
Yeah, I've heard of it.
You know,
no.
so I...
No, you old man.
I love Cheers, but like in Cheers,
When I watched Cheers.
There's an episode where they had World War I veterans inside the bar.
Wow.
And you know, I think Cheers was during the 80s, and it was goodness gracious, I'll think of his name here in a minute. But yeah, so like Woody Harrelson got his start in Cheers, but that was later. But there was an episode where there was a World War I veteran in it, and that was World War II was the last time we actually declared official war against countries, and then every country that we had a conflict or we deployed troops in was just a conflict. So after World War II was Korea, and that was just a conflict, and Vietnam was also a conflict.
Wouldn't it be crazy if Canada's the next one?
No. It might as well be a civil war.
Canada.
Yeah. Love
No.
you.
We can't do that. I mean, what? The last time we fought Canada was after the Revolutionary War, when the British were still held up in.
Yeah, they might have been bumbling around a little.
Yeah,
but it wasn't Canada we were fighting. They just happened to be in Canada.
It was the same.
What was it? Was it still a French territory at that time?
So Quebec might have been,
Yeah.
but the portions that we were fighting the British in were still British.
Okay.
And so yeah. Anyways,
Well, that would make sense too, because the French were our like original allies.
yes, yeah, and they still own property in like Louisiana. So
They're like all about the revolution.
yeah. So. But anyways, you know, yeah, back to Vietnam. You know, like the biggest thing was that Vietnam was a conflict. It was not a real war. And I mean, it's hard to think. Well, we had like 60,000 deaths in Vietnam over a span of 10 years, almost 10 years. And then we went into Afghanistan and experienced almost the same thing, but far less casualties.
I think the two closest ones would be us dealing with Vietnam and then us dealing with the Japanese. Because the Japanese had kind of the same mindset of like,
never surrender.
We're going to just die.
Yeah.
And there's nothing
Well,
you're
that's
gonna be able to do
because,
about it.
I mean, prior to World War II, the Japanese had this rise in like nationalist, like militarism sort of ideology. So it was people. Well, going through the school system when I was younger, they would teach it as, it was the samurai mindset that the Japanese had, which is
kind of wild.
It's sort of an incorrect take, right?
Mm-hmm.
What the Japanese did was they warped the Japanese mindset into a militaristic and nationalist mindset.
Yes.
And that's why so the use of propaganda is how they were able to manipulate the Japanese populace.
But with Vietnam, it was a fight for survival. So
Right.
it wasn't like a militaristic mindset. It was, if we don't do this now, then we are going to be persecuted for the rest of our lives. So like, I mean, because they were fighting the Japanese, they were fighting the French, and then they fought us. And they're like, goodness gracious, like, like people are just going to invade this country over and over and over. Like, when is it going to end?
Mm.
So they fought for their lives, for their life. And
it's crazy how cool they are with us now, though. You go to Vietnam,
yeah,
they'll show you everything. They'll be
They
like,
will.
check these traps, check these tunnels.
Yeah, I had a friend of mine that did a solo trip to Vietnam.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a friend of mine who's very well traveled and did.
Yeah.
He said Vietnam was his favorite place to go to.
Yeah, they're
It's a cool
vibing,
place.
dude. They don't. It's weird, dude. Like, they don't hold a grudge. Like, we literally just invaded them, killed a bunch of people, did some nasty shit, and they're like, yeah, check out these nails we covered in shit.
But the thing is everybody did nasty shit against Vietnam. So I mean, it's kind of, when you look back at it, the Russians kept them alive, and then, I mean, after we left, China tried to mess with them, and like they were still fighting, and they were like, geez, like when is it gonna end?
Yeah.
But like they ended that squabble with China pretty fast. But like ever since, they became the most successful communist country in the world. And like, I mean, it's kind of crazy looking back.
I mean, some would argue that China is actually the most successful
well, you know,
communist country.
Yeah, but we look at number of people.
I mean, like, and also
I am
like
not saying I'm pro-communist. Let's get that out of there.
But I mean,
at all.
with Vietnam, it's more like.
Can you show me that sickle tattoo?
No. I'm just saying from texts that I've read.
With Vietnam, it's like come and go. So with China, it's not so easy to come and go. With Vietnam, you can go into the country, do what you want, do what you will, and you can leave.
Yeah,
and
but are they a
it's a lot easier
superpower?
in China. Right.
Yeah, you go to China and it's
Well, you look at China from in the 1950s. Nothing, right?
No.
Because their civil war was ending. When did their civil war end?
Well, as before World War II.
Yeah, because they got all their territory back after World War II because the for the Sino Wars,
Yeah.
Japanese took it.
Yes.
So they got all their territory back after that because the Japanese had nothing.
No.
And then, so you're talking about from the 1940s, 50s. So in what 75 years? That's I think how old the Communist Party is.
Yeah.
So 75 years. What massive superpower.
Yeah.
One of the big three.
Yeah, that sounds right.
So
yeah, but you have to look at how much of that comes from a mix of that and population.
Yeah.
You know, I don't think you're going to see like
Well-
Vietnam become a superpower.
China isn't as communist as you think it is when it comes to the populace.
well,
So-
because they're trying to. Their market is like a free market.
Yes, it's more capitalist.
Yes, but because only like 3% of their population is actually part of the CCP. 6%. It's
More government.
yeah. Please look it up. Don't quote me on this, but
Yeah.
it's like 6%. It's single digits. It's very small. Like you actually have an official card saying that you're part of the Chinese Communist Party.
Yes.
But anyway, what we were getting at is what I was getting at is it's a major superpower, pretty
Yeah.
successful in my eyes, a communist country.
And in like Vietnam,
I would not want to be Chinese.
yeah.
Would not want to live there. Would not
Yeah, no, I get it. It's just like a country like Vietnam now, after going through what they've been through, is absolutely amazing because like I'm surprised Japan is what it is now. And same thing with Germany, really after World War II, that they are what they are now after such history.
For the CCP members, 2023 is 7.04%
Okay.
of the population.
There we go.
Up from 2013 being 6.34.
Okay, so I was
So not anything
close to
crazy
6%.
coming from Statsia.
So about 6 to 7%
Yeah.
in the last year.
Statsia, Chinese CCP members as a share of the Chinese population, 2013 to 2023. Okay. So very small share.
Which there was
Yeah.
actually recently somebody, a very high up member within the Communist Party in China that had their party card stripped from them. I forgot who it was, but it had to do with. Oh man, what were they doing? I don't know. It had to do with the way they were handling their business, and it was like something with fraud.
Okay.
I don't know. It's just something I saw in the news.
well, because if you're doing fraud with that, you're frauding the CCP, not some guy.
Yeah.
But I guess what I'm getting to is that he had to do something with the military. I don't remember if it was he was the head of a company that made military equipment or was part of a governmental department. But what Ping is doing is calling these people out right now, and he's actually trying to clean he's draining the swamp.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think too, like, one of the biggest things we saw with the Soviet Union was like, them trying to bring in a lot of these countries and saying like, hey, we're a part of something. We are like-minded individuals. And that maybe China is trying to do something similar with a lot of Southeast Asian countries and as well as like some of the Pacific Islands, like was it the Solomons? And it's all kind of interesting, but like it's just constantly history repeating itself.
Oh, speaking of that,
Dude, his
before I
history is
forget,
always repeating itself.
Always.
because I forgot to say in the other episode, what do you guys think of BlackRock buying the ports in the Panama Canal.
Oh,
from
that
China.
American company?
I
Yeah,
had no idea
BlackRock.
that they were buying ports.
Yeah, so they bought, what, is it 2 ports?
Yeah, because that's the whole thing where the U.S. taking back the Panama Canal
Yeah.
is the company BlackRock, which is a huge
So
All right.
fucking fund.
one thing I have against BlackRock, one, is that they were trying to purchase a ton of real estate in a lot. I can't remember how many states.
everywhere,
But
all of them.
It was a significant amount to where they would purchase a house and you were forced to rent from them.
Yep, that's what they do with neighborhoods. They buy, even around here, they'll buy
They'll
buy entire subdivisions.
Yep.
When they're built.
So now I'm not sure, and for anybody listening, you can check it yourself, but I'm pretty sure the government came in, I think it was during the Biden administration, that they capped them.
Yeah, they capped them at like 100 properties or something.
There's a percentage of properties for every state, and they had to limit them because they were just already going through and already purchasing properties, and I think they were forced to resale a lot of them, but yeah, I had no idea they were buying ports because I know that they're just blowing up right now.
Yeah, so I saw that. Now, when so Carter sold really gave Panama.
I thought it was for $1.
Yeah, he gave Panama the canal, right? But part of the treaty that was signed was the U.S. can still use force to ensure neutrality of the canal to ensure free trade around the world. So that means that's why we invaded Panama. I don't remember what years.
I cannot remember.
But that was the reason behind it. Because was it Russia?
I couldn't tell you.
I can't do, my mind's drawing a blank right now.
Yeah.
But anyway, there was influence outside of the U.S. that was gaining control of the Panama Canal. That's why we invaded, which was part of that original treaty that we signed. So
Okay.
the U.S. always had the ability to ensure neutrality. Well, not ensure, but enforce neutrality, which was what I think Trump was trying to get at by claiming that China had too much influence of the Panama Canal, because there was a Chinese company that did have ownership of a couple of the ports,
Yeah.
but it was just ports outside of the canal. Like, it wasn't like they were taking over the canal or anything. So I guess it's similar to what not Blackwater.
No, not them. That's a different organization.
Yeah.
Wrong one.
Yeah.
So it was during Noriega's power.
That's
So
right.
That was 1989. Yeah, December 20th, 1989 through January 31st, 1990. That was the invasion of Panama.
Okay. Yeah, so we invaded Panama to ensure the neutrality of the canal, therefore enforcing our rights per the treaty.
Yeah.
To maintain the neutrality.
Yep.
How many times did I just say neutrality?
I think like 10, 20 times.
That's what happens when you're, I think, how many glasses of...
A bottle.
Well,
So you
the
got a
whole
bottle.
The three of us have just downed a bottle of
Yeah.
whiskey.
Yeah, not great. It's like 93 proof.
Ooh.
Yeah, so for the listeners, all
47%.
Please
for all of
forgive us.
Clarissa's family,
Hi.
when you listen to this,
We're
we
sorry.
apologize.
Yeah,
This isn't
freaking
who we are.
just
Yes, it
just to
is.
show where we're at currently. There's a Defense One article right now. Pentagon is placing probationary employees on leave in advance of mass firing. The terminations are expected within weeks under the plans of firing nearly 1/10 of the DoD's 55,000 probies. And that is where we are at. Coming to you today, March 7th, 2025.
Here on NPR.
Dude, you keep looking at me like that, dude. We're gonna have a fucking rough time here.
I'm going to leave. You guys can do whatever you want.
No, you're gonna stay. You're gonna
No,
watch.
please. No.
But
I'll hold the camera and the flashlight.
Yeah,
I think that's it. That's a wrap.
that's it, dude. We're at 31 minutes for the mini.
Oh, hey, all right.
Yeah.
That was a good one.
So we'll wrap her up, and then I don't know. You got another week?
Yeah. Yeah, 1 week.
We'll see.
Yeah.
We know it went the other night. Oh, we could do another episode.
We
and
could
then
do
fucking
one
we didn't.
more.
Let's do a third one. This silent.
Yeah, let's do a third one and just looks and we're like, oh, let's go smoke a cigar.
Do some ASMR.
Yeah. Oh, dude, that's fucking. I hate that shit,
I'm
dude.
done. I swear. I hate
man.
it. I hate it so
But
much.
all right, we'll be back at some point, hopefully. If not, everyone's gone and it's just me. I don't want to sit here talking to you by
Yeah,
myself.
you do.
I could probably,
You'll do.
but we'll see. I don't know. Okay, bye bye.